You're listening to the Boston Greeks podcast with Ari and Foti. They've been bringing Greek culture online since 1998, and now they're bringing you the best Greek guests Boston has to offer. So grab your kafedaki and join us.
Hey everyone, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Boston Greeks podcast. I'm Ari, and I am here with my co-host Foti. Hello, Foti.
That's true, Ari.
How's it going?
It's going well, especially when we record our episodes for the Boston Greeks podcast.
Very much so, but you know what? Today is pretty cool. Today is, something that's somewhat up our alley, but not quite. Why don't you give us a little bit of background about our guests and then bring them on?
Well, Ari, as you mentioned, we're very blessed to be able to reach out to a lot of great, fascinating individuals in our community that are doing great things all across the board, across different industries, whether they're business, scholars, athletes, you name it. But this individual speaks loudly about preserving our Greek American culture. He's not just a fascinating historian, archivist. He's an amazing individual who's dedicated. The key word here is dedication, because when you listen to our guest tonight, you're going to realize the dedication that's involved here. So let's bring on to the Boston Greeks podcast the founder of Greek Cultural Resources, Meletios Pouliopoulos. Meletios, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here with you, Foti and Ari. I appreciate the invitation.
No, we appreciate you taking the time, and taking time is a big thing because you are very busy guy.
Well, we were busy. We felt busy.
We thought we were busy.
It's one of those things, if you love what you do, you don't even feel it. You just keep on doing it.
Well said. Meleti, let me just speak personally. I had the pleasure of listening to a presentation not too long ago, thanks to the Alpha Omega Council meeting that you are part of, that actually really resonated with me, and that's why I wanted you to come into the episode. You spoke to a room full of 50 influential individuals. We need to get the same message out to the broader audience that listens to the Boston Greeks podcast and beyond, because what you're doing is beyond, I'm sure you get great praise and accolades and interest, but people should really know who you are and what you're doing, all right? So having said that, Meletios, let's talk about first, where Meletios comes from, where you grew up, and we'll go from there.
I grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire, in the community of St. George. There's a cathedral there. I grew up on Bridge Street, and where there were farms all around, and the Greek community was very close. We had a lot of house parties. Everything was centered around the church, and I ended up going to work when I was a young boy. So my confession is that I never finished Sunday school, because at 12 years old I started working, and I've been working ever since. But I grew up in all that tradition, where we had music playing in the house, and wherever we went to church, and music. And music's one of those traditions that was brought over from the old country, and it just permeates our lives, right? It's part of our identity. So I've taken that as the first field of study,
Well, Meletios, back then in Manchester, was there a Greek radio program?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there were a couple, really. First of all, in those years, you could get Kamilakis, and the Kamilakis broadcast up the coast. And we had some of the North Shore stations. But if we're talking the late 50s, 60s, it was Jimmy Laios, who bounced between Manchester and Nashua. And so both, the communities were all connected in those years. Everyone listened to Jimmy, and his wife Helen did the polka party right afterward. There were characters, We actually have some of those broadcasts thanks to a friend of mine. So part of the collection here, it's a new way of looking at our history, right? And I just as we were sitting, waiting, I received an inquiry about the junta and how Greek Americans here reacted between 1967 and 74. And the guy's saying to me, do you have any radio? We do. We have radio broadcasts from those years, right?
It's amazing.
It's amazing stuff. So it just drops you right into it. Yeah, that's what it is.
I have a very quick little story I want to throw in here. When my mom passed away, she had a very vast VHS and record collection.
Right.
And we just didn't know what to do because it was so like precious to us, but we have absolutely no need for it, and we didn't know what to do until we came across you, Meletios.
Yeah.
We were like, this is going to go to good hands, and we donated my mom's record collection to you, and we felt so good about it because we knew it was going to good hands, and everything you do is so important to the history of just everything we do here as Greek Americans, and it's so important. And
Thank you.
it was just very appreciated that you do what you do, and you can kind of preserve the things that we hold dear.
Well,
That was really cool.
that's exactly it, Adia. It's this collection here is a collection of collections, and those family collections are so special because it's interesting to see how much music you had in your home, right? I mean,
Absolutely, yeah.
and everybody, I just one right after another, and some of the stories behind it. And sometimes in those tapes, we just had a collection that was donated that had these tapes of Greek TV programs from the West Coast. And I was transferring them I have a transfer area over there. And I just decided to do a Facebook Live. And people were saying, oh, wait a minute, that's the priest that used to be in San Francisco at the church before the earthquake, and they were telling the stories. And
Amazing.
now the producer of the show said that they don't have any of this archival stuff. So I've just shipped him over a couple years worth of his programs or significant parts of those years in the early '90s. That's kind of cool. You never know.
Sorry if I want to say something real quick. Melody, can you just say for anybody who doesn't know exactly what it is you're doing, because we're asking you these questions and saying these stories,
Yeah.
but then I'm realizing if somebody doesn't know what it is you're doing,
Yeah.
Sure.
it kind of doesn't make sense. Can we just start right there for a sec?
Right.
Yeah, so we were just real quickly, we were just letting the audience know Milet's background, Manchester, and then from that point on, let's talk about, like as Ari mentioned, like what happened from going through your childhood from Manchester. You talked about working, but then at some point something happened.
Well, yeah, when I was a kid, I grew up with a lot of music and everything in the house. So when I left home, was very nostalgic for the food and for this and for that. But the music collection was something that I'd always built up. And then I realized that the music that I grew up with wasn't available on LP or wasn't coming out even later as cassettes or re-releases on CDs or anything. It was just being lost. And I
Wow.
remember going into Oscar Papanastasiou's shop in Lynn, writing him a letter and going there and saying, look, can you get to the record companies and say, this is our culture, this is our heritage, and we want to. So anyway, so I decided to take it on when I found that it wasn't being saved by the libraries. Not that it's not in there, maybe somewhere uncatalogued, but there's a lot of uncatalogued material, undescribed material, and that's like another concern. But I just decided that I started to collect music, and then it just grew from there. And one time I was picking up a collection in Haverhill, and the fellow said to me, I'll never forget this. His daughter said, "Do you do anything with books? Like Byzantine music books, church?" And I said, "What do you got?" And she had this book from 1859 from Constantinople. And it was beautiful. It was, and so I took it and then I brought it to a friend and who brought it to Father Romanos now, who at the time was professor down at the school. And he said, this book is so important. And we didn't have it at the library there. So there are these resources, these books, these newspapers, this music, these recordings that aren't being centralized and they're not being collected by the libraries by and large. They're not being studied. And so my organization as Greek Cultural Resources is to protect that part of our heritage, those cultural artifacts. And some of that is going into other institutions and helping them think through processing their stuff, But I hope that answers the question. It's our heritage. And that's why at the Alpha Omega meeting, I stood up and I said, if you do a Google search right now and you say, when is the first Greek Independence Day parade in Boston? It's going to tell you 1994. But we know that's not true. We've got films, we've got all kinds of newspaper evidence going back to 1903. We've been
What?
doing Greek Independence Day parades. Yeah, right.
Yes,
What?
when
I
Meletios
did
said
not
that, I was
expect
like,
you to say that.
It's wild.
I thought
And
you were
I
gonna say like 1970 something or something.
I thought, okay, 1903, what are they going to have? A couple of people, with raising the flag. But no, it was like hundreds of people that took the streets, and they started in a church with a service. And that year in 1903, they all decided to dress up in full costumes. So it was
Wow,
like hundreds of people in Fustanelis going down Boylston Street.
that's
Yeah,
crazy.
same. So yeah, like when you think about those years, now we have the internet, and sometimes the community doesn't feel as close
Hmm.
as what happened back then, that they were able to gather that many people. So
I'll tell you, as an internet guy, as somebody who was involved with one of the first websites in Boston for Greeks. I really feel like the internet has kind of, the internet in many ways brings us together. We could talk to somebody across the world like easily. We could interview you, 6 states away. Like it has an element to it, but that community, that tight knit community, because I was part of the Greek community leading into the internet time, and then I started the website, so I was very involved. But I noticed that like the more internet and social media and stuff like that, the more apart we were.
isn't
There
that
was no urgency to get together.
yeah,
Like, oh, we'll just text. Oh, I'll just FaceTime.
yeah,
So it's
it's
tough. But like what you're doing is
yeah.
super important.
Thank you. It really is. We have to stand up for the stuff. And people want access to it. That's the whole thing. I can't keep up with the demand, frankly.
Well, I was going to
Um,
say that's a massive undertaking. Like
yeah,
how could one person or even like a few people how
yeah.
can you catalog, digitize, and have available so much content?
mm,
Yeah, it's a constant thing. It's a constant thing. And it's a labor of love, and it's also trying to help people when they come in. So this collection is curated at this point. So someone just wrote to me, like I say, and they want to know information about this period of time and how the Greek Americans responded to the junta. Well, that may exist in old videos. It may exist in radio things or in articles, but I don't necessarily have them all cross-referenced. So it's
So, like in theory, all I can think of is, can one of these billionaires just dump some money? Because in theory, if you get this stuff digitized and out there on a website or some sort of archive
right.
and cross-referenced with all the proper tags,
Yeah,
which is theoretically possible, but man,
sure.
is that a huge undertaking. But if that's done, I mean that would be such a huge resource for people.
It's unbelievable. It
Imagine you're
really
at,
is.
at Christmas dinner and
Yeah.
somebody says, "Oh yeah, Yaya was at the choreo doing this," and they're like, "Wasn't somebody taking pictures there?" Well, yeah, let's look it up. And they go to your site and boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom. They put in some keywords and pictures pop up. I mean, that
Exactly.
would be the greatest thing ever.
It's unbelievable. And we have a responsibility to do that. We have a responsibility to stand up for our stuff. And when newspapers and books aren't in our libraries, but they're part of this resource here, then it's time to sit back and say, well, look, all of this other material was never collected with any thought and purpose. Maybe we need to do that. Maybe we need to have a research center at some point, a physical place where people can also go in and experience and do the kinds of things you would do in that environment. There's a good argument for it. I have a business plan to support that, and I'm hoping I can engage people. So yeah, it would take a billionaire to
I,
really.
I mean, Greeks are very successful people, especially in this country. I mean, there's got to be something that can be done.
Yeah, there is, and it's not just with money, but it's with thought. It's. I really think that we should have this thing about our history, our Greek American heritage. That so long the narrative has been about classical Greece, and when I was growing up, that was the thing, classical studies. My word, and I studied ancient Greek, and I studied Katharevousta. When I was a kid. But now we've moved on, and people are saying, well, we're connected, we're really connected to the last 140 years of that here. That's where our traditions, that is our heritage to ourselves and to our next generation, because we're going to shape that. We're going to write that. We are right. We're going to tell our stories too. Then it's lost. And I'm seeing these collections. I have several that are out there that are hanging in the balance that I can't save on my own. So I need engagement. I need a leader to lead the leaders, and sometimes that's with money, and sometimes that's a billionaire that can enable this. I'm sure that this will self-fund itself. People will get behind it. The way they have, I started a project up in Manchester. I don't know if you guys heard, but I'm very proud of it. It's at the library at St. George, and I went back to give a talk back in 2019, did some research talking about the history, whatever, and everything. And people loved it, and they said, we want to have you back for another talk. And I said, well, how about this? How about if there's so much interest, why don't we start a memory project? Let's get some oral histories done. Let's get our stuff in here and digitize it and connect our memories to these events. And we've done it, and now we're in our 5th year with volunteer staff, money in the bank, completely funded by the community, and our doors are open to the broader community. Yeah,
That's amazing.
Man, I can't, because again, like in a tiny little way, recorded the nightlife scene of the Greeks in Boston for like a 10, 12-year span, and I put those. I'm now putting those pictures online.
Yeah.
And that's like this much compared to what you're doing, and it's like so much work. But like it's so important, to have that. Greek Americans are very educated in this country, and they're very successful in this country. And to lose our history, or to not be able to access our history, or for our future generations, our kids, to not be able to see how things were outside of like, the older generation telling them. But I mean, how long is that going to last? The older generation is going to go, and these youngsters are going to grow and not really know how it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like an old man telling these younger kids, like, "Oh, you know how good it was back then." Like, but it's like so important.
But they were important, so we could take a page out of history and try to figure ourselves back to reuniting the community. I welcomed the Goya down to the library, and I remember the Goya, well, my God, when I was growing up, it was like 100 kids. I mean, there were a lot of people in the Goya. And just our chapter, and there was like 8 people that came into the library. I said, well, who's here from St. Nick's? No one raised their hand. Who's here from the Assumption? One guy raises his hand. I said, oh, hi, and I'm welcome. And he says, no, I'm from St. George. He said, it's just us.
Wow.
Well, why? Why did we go tribal? In the 60s, with Yakubos especially, we were a united community. So the intern that I had, Nicholas Lambros, great guy, he's now at Boston College in the law program. But when he was in pre-law, actually, he said to me, I have a lighter semester and I'm looking to learn something about Greek American history. And so I gave him a whole long list. And one of those things, the things he picked was to process the Goya material, And so he's looking at photos and stuff. And there was Goya material going back from 1952, just about to the beginning of the organization, right up until, the 90s. And it's probably the largest collection, I think, outside of DePaul University, the largest collection of. There's a lot of organization and archive material here too. But I asked him to process it. At the end, I said, well, can you do a video and tell us what you learned? Because he was so excited, because you guys had a national organization, you did all this fundraising. Look, back then, right, in the 60s, before the internet, they were publishing within 1 year. They were publishing national magazines, and I mean, so I that's what I think. I think like if we really want to pass it along, we're also going to pass what worked, and those things worked for those. So,
oh man, I get so inspired like hearing this, because it's as far as Foti and I are concerned, like it's a passion of ours as well. I mean, a lot of what we do is Greek American and Greek themed, technology and websites and apps and whatnot.
Yeah,
I would love to be able to access something where I could see this history, or hear like music that you can't easily access, or see pictures of these bygone eras of these like amazing Greeks and how they came about. Like it's just a really truly fascinating thing.
It's
And
great.
I said it before, very important for us. Very
Yeah.
important.
You know,
We can pull it together. We're getting all these different elements, right? We're getting these audio files. I just got a collection from the early '60s for live events, right? And we know where they were. We got some of the flyers. There's some pictures that are associated, and now we can kind of recapture those nights, you know. Just
you know,
very cool.
Melody, you were discussing the project that you've done over at St. George's in Manchester.
Yeah.
But can we also mention the project that you're working with Nancy Agris?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, what a great project that was. And it's interesting. We always say how that really got going. But Nancy, I'd say Nancy's family was behind the St. George project too, because I made a proposal and it basically was on a burner. And we were just talking one day and she said, "Hey, my family wants to do something in honor of my aunt who was the Sunday school supervisor." And that kicked off the project. But with this newspaper project, what happened was, you know, when you're independent scholar and you do a lot of research, you go to the libraries. And I used to go and I'd make notes. So if Harry told me he was born on, you know, whatever date it was, I might go and look up the newspaper right around then and see what announcements were made, whatever it was. Went to go to the newspaper and it wasn't there. The Hellenic Chronicle, the one that I grew up with, ran for 50 years, by the way. And so I called Nancy. I went down to all these libraries and it was missing. They got rid of it. And I called up Nancy and she said, "Well, there's one collection that we know of now. It's at the Archbishop Iacovos Library." So Alpha Omega sponsored a project to digitize that existing archive, which is a mixture of microfilm and paper copies, which was, you know, 35,000 plus pages of digitization to put it into a searchable archive. And the idea was that we would preserve it for all time and that we would make it accessible. We didn't, Nancy and Alpha Omega, everyone felt that it wasn't going to be a pay to play kind of thing. There's no profit to be made in this, but wow, this was the glue for our community for 50 years. And what an asset, right?
So Meleti, just so you know, my family was neighbors and very good friends with Nancy's dad's brother. So Nancy's uncle was our next door neighbor for our whole lives. So one day when I was talking about something with Foti about Alpha Omega, my sister's like, "Oh, you know Anna, who was our neighbor. She just recently passed away.
Oh,
Rest in
yeah.
peace." Yeah. So she was like, "Oh, you know, Anna's brother-in-law was the guy who founded Hellenic Chronicle." I was like, "Oh yeah, I knew that, but like I kind of forgot." And she's like, "You know that he was at one of your birthday parties in Cape Cod. We had a birthday party for me in Cape Cod. He was there, and he put the birthday party and pictures in the Hellenic Chronicle."
Oh,
And I was like,
really?
"Oh, how can we find this?" And she's like, "There's no
Oh,
way you can find it."
I'll
But she's
send you a link.
like, you know, we might have a picture ourselves that we gave to him to put in the Chronicle, but as far as the Chronicle is concerned, she's like, "I have no idea. I don't even think it exists." And I was like, "That's so unfortunate." So what you were saying just triggered, like, how many people would want to see this, and how many people will have some story that you know may have appeared in the Chronicle, or they talked about something or an event or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it's
I
just so
mean,
cool to have that.
it's very cool, you know. Mary Cleary, I remember when came down to Boston, Cleary was involved. There was Helicon and then there was Oxyon. There were these organizations that were, you know, trying to help young people and to direct money into the right pockets, but also help each other. And there was a networking thing. And all this history that's in the Chronicle on that. You could look up just so much, you know. And it's been used now to Alexander Kitroev, the professor, famous, you know, lead professor, scholar of Greek American Studies, used it to write to support his writings for the Greek Orthodox Church in America, the new book, and on the new AHEPA book. And several people. So we do have a link that you can go in and you can search. It's not the final resting place. We knew that we were ahead of the curve when we proposed the project. We didn't want to put it behind a wall. We wanted to make sure that it's accessible.
I think it's one of those things where, in theory, the way the internet works as far as making money, like you put it behind a wall or you charge a subscription or whatever. but again, it's like one of those tricky things where you want this out there, you want people to see it and to have access to it, but you also can't kill yourself forever doing this work for nothing. So something has to sustain you. So it's like how do you find that kind of balance? But
That's the question, Ari. How do
that's
you
the question.
turn my question is how do I turn spectators into participants? How do I, we're so used to consuming, especially in the digital world. I remember a few years ago, 10 years ago or so, I was in Florida. I traveled the country doing interviews, people as part of my field work. So I'm down there interviewing a guy, and I started showing him some pictures. And he came, he goes, wait a minute. It's like 80 years old, pulls out a thumb drive. And he goes, Ekomasi. And he goes, here. And he wanted me to fill his thumb drive with everything I had
That's so
that
funny.
I had just spent like 10 years on the road collecting. Not that I wouldn't be generous for that purpose, but the next thing you know, it would be in someone's TikTok video. I actually saw pictures like that. So it's, I think we're used to having a lot of things available and thinking someone else is going to really save the important stuff. And it does take money. It takes support. And with a little bit of financial support, we can go a long way. So I'm hoping there's someone out there in the listening audience that can do that. I've talked to people, a lot of people on all over, and I've asked for that level of enablement.
I
So
mean, is there any like I mean, because Foti and I we run a nonprofit of our own where we do like fundraisers, we do like events to raise money. I mean,
yeah.
isn't there something we could do like for you or with you that we could like kind of raise money
Oh man,
to
that would be so
contribute to
great.
this?
I'm sure.
There's so many things that I think between the resources that obviously we'll talk about this offline,
Yeah,
but I
great.
think there's a lot we could do because I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a web tech app person, so
yeah,
any of those resources, 100% I can contribute my efforts. But as far as
yeah.
raising money, I mean, Foti's like pretty smart guy when it comes to events and fundraising. So
That'd
between
be good.
us, just as two additional resources, I don't see why not. I mean, this is so important to us as well.
Make
I'd
sure
appreciate that.
you're being recorded now, so make sure, make sure
I'm
you.
locked in.
You're on the hook.
I'm locked in.
But
No,
that's
but I'm going to second what Ari is mentioning because
yeah.
the first step was when I listened to you is number one, let's get Meleti on the podcast so that
Foti actually called me right after that
after,
meeting, and he was
Did
like,
he really?
yes,
I could tell when Forty's like kind of excited about something. I mean, we've worked together for 20 plus years,
Yeah.
and he was pretty pumped after that Alpha Mega meeting. And I thought maybe somebody was like, "Hey, Forty, we're gonna give you like $1 million," but he was like, "I just heard Meleti speak, and like it was so good." So I vouch for him being really pumped after your speech.
yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. That was the whole point. I was hoping that I would get.
100%,
Thank you.
100%. And if I can share a story with all of you now that you're mentioning sharing stories about the involvement with the Hellenic Chronicle, Nancy Agris, Ari's, family connection. You are in charge of the digitization of this project. I also have a connection to the Hellenic Chronicle through Nancy because when I was studying at Boston College, I was studying public relations journalism. Nancy gave me my first gig to write for the Chronicle, writing a column, calling on the dignitaries that were going to the Greek consulate at the time and writing little pieces for the Hellenic Chronicle was my first stab at writing. And thanks
No
to Nancy,
kidding.
she gave me this opportunity. And now that I'm listening to you, I was like, I never got to see those articles. So maybe one of these days I can take you up on finding them.
Gee, that'd be great. That'd be really interesting. There was regular columnists. There are a lot of people that Nicolas Cage has gotten his start that way. And there were a lot of regular columnists, both from the church. There's a religious question box that was done, and then there was a music column early on, which is kind of cool. There was in the 50s and early 60s. Regular columns about our military history. The Meletios Post had a regular column. The AHEPA had a regular column. So we could actually collect those, and that could be like a series.
Series.
But think of the photos, I met with someone recently that does a lot of social media work, but I said, you realize you're showing the same photos over and over? And he said, yeah, I know. I said, well, look, we got thousands of photos you can show. But again, it's you want to make sure that the preservation piece happens first. We're in a whole consuming mode, consume.
I have a question for you. I have
Go
a
ahead.
quick question, Meleti. Sorry to cut you off, Art. Could this ever have you? I'm sure maybe you thought about this now, but could this ever be an exhibit where people can come to an actual event that can see
Yeah.
these archives? As
That
an
could be another
exhibit?
fundraising idea right there.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I've given talks. I mean, as you know, if you saw, my talks are multiple media talks. Oftentimes, I have physical objects. We
Mm.
had back in 2018. Well, back in 2015, 16, I did a exhibit down in Florida on Greek music in America. And that exhibit, like so many of our other exhibits, just end up in the basement. And so we had gotten permission to bring that up here. And we were going to do a big exhibit at the Meletios Center with concerts and speakers and everything, but we couldn't raise the funding. So it's the hardest thing because I think people will really appreciate it. Good fundraiser.
Once again, Meleti, as you're speaking, stuff is running through my mind.
Hmm.
There are definitely ways that this can get done. If we're smart about it, we know there's a lot of ways. Again, we'll talk more about this, but
Good. Great.
I bring this up because everybody watching and listening. I mean, this is one of the most important things we can as a culture do.
Sure,
How
super.
can we forget what makes our culture our culture? Like these things will go away if Meleti wasn't doing what he's doing, and that's a shame. That
Thank you.
it's a shame that it's all on your shoulders. Like you need help, you need money, you need resources. Nothing great could happen without resources and money.
Money is really important because we have the programs and I know that there's students out there. There's armies and armies of people that are willing to help. I need to be able to have my time freed up and enabled a little bit. These groups of scholars that want to come over now for a week at a time, two separate groups, that's a lot of time on my end. So
You are truly the Leonidas of Greek American heritage archiving.
thank you. You guys are great. I appreciate it. It's really a labor of love and to see other people enjoy that, or learn from it.
Yeah.
And nothing like it. Nothing better than that.
So we usually ask, what does your path look like? What does your future look like? And I'm just going to assume it's doing what you're doing, archiving the Greek American experience.
Well, basically, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's funny because if you go, my website's very out of date, because it was all centered around music.
We could help you with that as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's these things generate a lot of inquiry, which is good. I have a lot of demand right now for the resources, a lot of questions, so much that's almost a full-time job. But it's I remember that question was asked to me by Thanasi Haberis on the Greek program, Eleni Vitali's program, and Thanasi said, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And I said, in 5 years, we're going to have an institution. We're going to be fully funded. We're going to be supported with sustaining funds. And I really put out a big vision. And I've called to the Greek community a number of times. There have been a number of articles in national newspapers, national projects. There's been a lot of work that's been done. I'm just saying there's a lot that needs to be done. And we need money, basically. We need money to continue. So I'm not sure where the future will be for me. Whether it will be here in Boston, as I hope. I hope we can get a center going. And by the way, I don't, my plan is to operate as a virtual organization, and there's a whole layout of how this would progress. But we have to build that support in the community. We can't just look to one family and say, Forti, Mr. Billionaire Forti, would you please, endow this? Because we really want to stimulate some help and some awareness, I think, from the community. So there will be calls for funding, And if you folks can help to amplify that, already I've given you a couple of projects that need to be enabled, and all of this ongoing work of preservation needs to be enabled.
100%. 100%. I
Thank
mean,
you. Thank you. You're the first to say that. Thank you.
we're 100% behind what you're doing. I mean, we know you as a person. We know the work that you do. This isn't like some guy who just appeared out of nowhere saying, "Give me money to do this." It's like this is what your life has been. We've known about you. It's just very important work. And however, and again, we'll take it offline. But however we could help, 100%, we would love to help in any way we can because we do feel this is very important.
It's so great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I had a feeling that was the case because you invited me here.
Yeah, like I said, Foti got out of that meeting and he's like, dude, and I was like, he sounds so excited. He's like, the speech Meleti did was like so inspiring. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And he was telling me all about it. And he's like, we're gonna bring him on the show. I was like, how did we not have him on the show already? Like, he should have been multiple. Like, this should be the first of many.
Yes.
Could be.
I mean, just the timelines that Meleti was putting out there on all these great accomplishments and all these, publications from years beyond. I'm like, no way. Why am I finding out now? Like,
isn't it cool?
You know this?
Yeah. So, I have to show you something because it's part of it too. Because it costs money to process the materials and This is from 1925. It was published, but you can't see it now.
Put it like right in front of you. Put it right in front of your chest.
Oh well,
put it in your face.
It's the 15-year anniversary of the National Herald. They put out a special issue, 10th year anniversary of this thing, and this is unbound now. So the binder was cut.
Put it like directly in front of you. Yeah, right there.
No, you know what it is? It's the blur.
Yeah, it's the blur.
It's the blur. All right. Well, I'm very excited about this, and this is filled with a lot of history here, church history, and I learned some stuff about the the National Opera Company that was here. I have records and stuff, and now we have photographs and bios of the people that were singing on the stage in New York in those years. So it's kind of cool.
Wow, that's crazy.
Anyway, I'm sure we can spend days going through this together. Which means that we need to bring you back onto the program, and we can chop it up and bring you back on discussing maybe more defined, maybe times of history in Greek America. But
or even he could even like pick things that speak to him, and we could discuss like different images, different albums, different something. I mean, I would love to do that as well. Let the podcast world also archive what you're saying.
Right, yeah, that's great. What a great ideas. Thank you.
And for our listening audience, obviously, Meleti is really sending the message here that the work that he's doing does require our support and help and involvement. So let's take that into consideration. And having said that, Meleti, let's discuss how people can get in touch with you. Or you mentioned you have a website if they want to learn more information, regardless of what you mentioned about the website. Let's get that information, even though Ari's going to supply that in the show notes as well.
It's really great. So the organization, again, is called Greek Cultural Resources. And if you do a search on Google, you'll find a lot of articles related to my work as a consultant, both as an independent scholar and links to the organization and where the material has been used in the past. My website is greekculturalresources.org, and very simply, it's Meletios with an OS, Meletios at greekculturalresources.org. My should I have phone number? Why not?
Sure.
I mean, as long as you don't mind it being public, because Foti might call you late at night. He has nothing else to do.
I'm not going to ask you to renew your warranty.
Well, it's weird. I've actually had some stalkers.
I totally believe it. It's people.
It's a scary world.
You know what? You should get like a free Google number or something to use just for this type of stuff.
My cousin did that. I called my cousin on what I had as his home phone. I've had it in my address book for years. And he goes, "What are you calling me on this for?" It's like an old Google phone number. He uses it when he registers at places, you know?
Yeah, I've worked with Foti for 20 years. I still only give him my Google number. I won't give him my real number.
You learned pretty quickly.
That's so great.
Meleti, again, we know how busy you are. We want to thank you so much for taking the time with us, for telling us a little piece of your story that goes so far beyond what one podcast will cover. But all the information that you provided will also be in the notes. So everybody watching and listening, check that out. We say this about all Greek things. Very important. This is probably one of the most important that I could think of. Support. You have to support. If you don't support, these things go away. Once they go away, it's too late. It's too late at that point. And this is why we have to do it now. And Meleti, we're going to speak obviously offline after this. You have our full support. But everybody watching and listening, please check it out. Please reach out. If you have stuff, reach out to him. If you need stuff, ask a question. Top priority is finding my birthday party in the Hellenic Chronicle. That's number one. But thank you so much, Meleti, for being with us.
Thank you, Meleti. This was amazing.
It was great. Thank you.
All right, and we just want to thank everybody out there for watching and listening. Thank you, Foti, once again. Thank you, Meleti. Everybody, check out all the information. Make sure you check it out. Support. Do anything you can as a Greek or just a Philhellene to help us preserve these important things and help Meleti with his mission. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Yes, us.